TW. I don't know if I was sexually abused as a child or not. I don't know how to tell my husband. I have never expressed this aloud or in writing. I have never even followed through with these thoughts, and I quickly push them aside when they randomly come to mind, which occurs perhaps once every few years. One of my earliest recollections is from when I was around 3 or 4 years old. I was lying on my back in a room by myself. I placed one of my toys on my clitoris and remember thinking that it felt pleasurable. My mother walked by the open door, appeared quite concerned, and instructed me to stop. That's all I recall. Did I simply experience a strange dream? Did I unintentionally touch myself and discover that it felt nice? Did someone teach me this? I do not remember anything else from that night, assuming it actually took place. Another hazy memory involves me being around 4 or 5 years old, lying in my bed in the middle of the night. I feel as though I was awakened by someone touching me between my legs, over my clothing. That's it. I don't have any further recollections. Perhaps I dreamt it. I also remember my pediatrician examining my vagina once when I was approximately 4. My mother was present, but I felt uneasy despite understanding that a doctor was allowed to examine my body. I am uncertain if that was a normal part of a checkup, or if I was being assessed for signs of abuse or something similar. I recall my parents educating me about private parts, ensuring I understood that I should inform them if anyone ever attempted to do something inappropriate. I felt ready to tell them immediately if someone tried something, but no one ever did. There was no significant event that made me think, yes, this is wrong, because I was half asleep when I sensed that someone touched me. At around 5, I remember reading a book intended to educate children and help prevent sexual abuse. I don't recall anyone reading it to me. It was simply a book we had at home. I read it alone one evening. In the book, a girl fell off her bike. A man inquired if she was hurt and checked her knees, elbows, and so forth, before wanting to inspect between her legs. I remember feeling both fascinated and aroused by the picture and the text on that page. Even though I recognized it was wrong, for some reason, it felt good. I don't remember reading it again because despite my curiosity, it made me uncomfortable. I should have been in therapy due to the obvious distress, but I kept it to myself as it felt inappropriate, so no one knew. I also remember looking up the terms penis and vagina in a dictionary when I was around 7. I was occasionally intrigued by topics related to sex, but it was not something that consumed my thoughts. My last recollection is from ages 10 to 14. I was lying in bed and felt someone touch me between my legs, over my clothing. It's such a vague memory, and I can't pinpoint when it occurred, so I might have simply dreamt it. I remember feeling it was inappropriate and being alarmed, but I also felt excited about the contact. I feel as though I must have imagined it, as I was old enough to push their hand away and stop them. However, I immediately dismissed it from my mind because, clearly, it was not acceptable if it actually happened. Currently, my husband and I enjoy a fulfilling sex life. When I felt comfortable enough to share my sexual desires, we tried incorporating a daddy kink. I have often fantasized about being coerced into sexual activities. Although my husband has never forced me, just calling him daddy evokes a sense of obligation to obey him. I don't know why, but I enjoy it, and it somehow makes me feel secure. I consistently feel safe with him. I appreciate being good and following directions and evidently pleasing him. He sometimes refers to me as a good girl during intimate moments, though not always. I love it. When we are making love without any kinks, I sometimes envision him saying, "Just be a good girl and take it. Let me make you feel good." I despise that I have these thoughts. I resent feeling the urge for kink almost every time, even when my husband is simply expressing his love for me. I want to just make love to my partner. I have often fantasized about being taken advantage of, but in a nice way. When I would masturbate as a teenager, I would imagine some man saying, "Don't tell anyone. It's okay. Let me make you feel good." The notion of someone taking advantage of me was highly arousing. I began masturbating at around 10 or 11. Initially, I would imagine making love to my future husband an innocent portrayal of love, losing my virginity, and experiencing magic. I started with my fingers, then progressed to using a hairbrush, even employing my phone as a vibrator. Once, I rubbed myself against a rounded piece of furniture in my room. Eventually, I discovered showerhead masturbation and became quite addicted to it. There were occasions when I would take longer showers solely for that purpose. I think it was during showers that the being taken advantage of kink emerged. I am uncertain of its origin. I simply longed to be taken advantage of and taught how to be sexual by an experienced man. I do not understand what was wrong with me. I was merely a child, and these thoughts dominated my arousal. At 12, I discovered chat rooms and would stay up all night on weekends, posting questions like, "What would you do if you caught me masturbating in the shower?" Men would respond, and I engaged in multiple conversations simultaneously with various men, imagining different scenarios we concocted together. I would masturbate over these scenarios. I relished when they described how they would have sex with me and finish, but I preferred the foreplay and build up to the act. I loved the stories we created. They were like personal pornography for me, and I became undeniably addicted. I learned about role-playing, and men would reach out to me, stating things like, "I'm your uncle, and I caught you pleasing yourself. I won't tell anyone, but you must let me help you." I often thought, well, if it's by marriage and not blood relation, it's not a bad scenario, and it's obviously not a real situation, so it's fine. And I was incredibly turned on, intentionally searching for men posing as my stepfather or a babysitter. I never envisioned individuals I actually knew, but rather created fictitious men in my mind. I recall one role playing as my father's boss, where I had to submit to him so my father could retain his job. Without considering my actual father at all, the idea of a grown man having authority over me thrilled me greatly. I savored the fantasy of engaging in sexual activities while concealing it from everyone I knew. At 13, I believed I was mature and did not want to appear old and experienced, so I stated that I was 12, which is unsettling to reflect upon now. Even at 13, it is disturbing. I should not have been exposed to the content in that chat room. I must have attracted a multitude of creeps. It's revolting to consider at this moment, but as a child, I couldn't grasp the situation as I do now. I felt a profound desire to be sexually assaulted, but in a nice way by older men. I wanted to feign timidity and be persuaded into consenting to sex with a man. I craved to feel innocent yet taken advantage of, which is astonishing because I was genuinely a child exploited by adult men online. When they claimed to be 16, I wouldn't respond because they were too young. People invariably lied about their ages, but I only engaged with those asserting they were in their 20s, 30s, or 40s. 50 was too old and disgusting for me. I cannot recall when I ceased visiting the chat room, but I assume it ended in high school when I began interacting with real people in my life. A few months after turning 13, I started conversing with a boy. He was 16 or 17 and was the first real person with whom I exchanged intimate messages. We were not in a relationship, but we texted each other and met up a few times. He was the first person who kissed me, leading to a makeout session, and he fingered me a few days later. I hadn't even shaved, as I did not anticipate that occurring. I remember sitting in my freshman math class and daydreaming about it. I began sexting a boy closer to my age shortly after turning 14. We planned to meet in person once and engaged playfully, but I don't recall the specifics, except that we did not have sex. I dated my first high school boyfriend and performed oral sex for the initial time. I lost my virginity to my subsequent boyfriend at 16, and I had sex with my current husband at 18. All of those experiences were enjoyable as they were novel and exciting, allowing me to engage in sexual activities in person without needing a kink to enhance them. However, the idea lingered in my mind occasionally until I began to desire being taken advantage of by my husband. I wanted to role-play as an inexperienced teenager who was being exploited by a nice man in his 20s. I did not reveal every sexual preference to him, but gradually we began to refer to him as Daddy. I have ceased envisioning myself as younger, as with age it feels unsettling. I simply do not understand these feelings. I somehow stopped the habit of masturbating with every shower, though I still do it sporadically. When having sex with my husband, I can orgasm multiple times, but once we finish, I rub my clitoris and fantasize about Daddy taking care of me, allowing me to climax one or two additional times. I despise that I indulge in this. It feels as though I am unable to stop. I recently confided in my husband that I would love for him to force me to have sex while I express reluctance, though he is opposed to it as he rightfully should be. When I desire it, he can be aggressive at times, placing his hands around my neck and spitting on me, which I enjoy. However, occasionally I crave something more. I want him to have sex with me while I feign disinterest. I don't know what is wrong with me. I cannot discern if something happened to me to elicit these impulses. I am unsure if I was ever abused or if I am simply highly sexual for some reason. I desire a normal sex life without feeling guilty or wrong for my emotions. I think I need to disclose to my husband that I might have been abused, but I am afraid to do so. Thank you for any advice. Story 2. Got to witness both sides of a toxic relationship with an extremely unfaithful and abusive partner. I am not sure if this is the appropriate subreddit for this, but this incident happened a while ago involving a man with whom I eventually became good friends. I, 20 years old at the time, had been friends with his girlfriend, 19, long before they began their relationship. However, I became very close to both of them during the time they dated. I ended up spending a considerable amount of time with either one or both of them together over the 3-year duration of their relationship. He, 24, was aware that he did not have to worry about his girlfriend being alone with me because I am gay. However, due to this unique position I found myself in, where I eventually became equally close to both individuals, I had the rare opportunity to witness both sides of the situation when all the chaos unfolded. When the girl, we will call her Alexis, began sneaking around behind her boyfriends, we will call him Mark, back, this kind of behavior was not anything new for her. I have known this girl since we were children, as she grew up just a few houses away. Therefore, I had many chances to observe how she behaved in her relationships. This well-established history, however, was also why I did not involve myself when she began cheating. I had not yet become very close to Mark. I probably only knew him for a few months, but because Alexis knew I could keep a secret, she pretty much told me everything. Often, I was even present to see it happen for myself. I do not necessarily mean that I was in the same room watching another man take her to bed, although that did happen on a few occasions. I was usually in the same building or just outside, aware of what she was doing inside. Knowing that the only reason she brought me along to some random place was so that she could meet one of her side partners, and she had quite a few, most of whom I also became quite familiar with, even forming close relationships with 2 of them. As far as I know, Alexis's infidelity started with one of the 2 men that I also became close friends with. It began innocently when he started hanging out more frequently with Alexis and me while Mark was away at work. He had irregular hours, or resting during the day. When Mark learned about the other man spending so much time with us, Alexis introduced him to Mark as her sister's friend with whom she had also developed a friendship. How they met was true. However, he was much more than just a friend to her, and over time he was far from the only new friend to enter her life. Mark really did not seem to begin questioning things until his girlfriend's behavior became significantly more suspicious. She would suddenly spend large amounts of time away from him, providing him with any excuse she could think of at that moment. At times, she even had the audacity to tell him the most blatantly obvious lies I have ever heard. For a long time, I was repeatedly astonished by Mark's refusal to accept the nonsense she was telling him as anything other than absolute truth. Her behavior eventually created some tension between them, resulting in frequent arguments, many of which I was also present to witness. Some of those arguments even became quite intense at times. Mark, however, still wanted to make the relationship work with her, despite the growing seriousness of their conflicts. Even when Alexis pulled a knife on him one evening while the 3 of us were socializing in his kitchen, it was not enough to convince him to leave. He later told me that this had not been the first time she had attempted to stab him, so I guess he was pretty much accustomed to it by that point. To make matters worse, Alexis had a tendency to accuse Mark of cheating on her, despite knowing and admitting to me that she was fully aware of how committed he was to her. She accused him of infidelity over the most trivial matters. For instance, if Mark looked in another woman's direction for longer than she deemed acceptable, that was reason enough for her to make accusations. She forced him to stop communicating with any female friends he had before their relationship, He could not like any photos posted by other women on social media, and she would not tolerate him even speaking directly to women other than her, even innocently. Naturally, there were times she made exceptions for him to converse with women, but those exceptions only applied to interactions he could not avoid, like speaking to a cashier or server. Even in the few situations she permitted it, if their conversations appeared even slightly too friendly, she would become upset. In the best-case scenarios, she would initiate pointless arguments, and in the worst-case scenarios, she would start physically attacking him the moment the three of us were alone again. Frequently, she used these unnecessary conflicts as a pretext, providing her with a legitimate reason to distance herself from him for periods of time, allowing her to cheat without raising her boyfriend's suspicions. As mentioned earlier, she had multiple men she regularly saw. I'm not sure of the exact number, I am aware of at least 7. I will not detail the drama that unfolded during our interactions with any of them. This post would turn into an entire novel if I tried to. But instead, I will jump to the last few months of their relationship when her inability to remain faithful resulted in a pregnancy that she was extremely anxious about discovering. She had very few clues regarding who the actual father might be, and all this was happening just a couple of months after Mark unexpectedly stumbled upon undeniable evidence of Alexis's actions during her graduation ceremony. Her younger sister unintentionally revealed it to him, and it really devastated him. He and I started to become much closer friends after that incident. We became such close friends that I finally had to request that Alexis stop sharing details about her sexual escapades. I was starting to feel guilty about the extensive information I was withholding from Mark. There were just so many troubling aspects about their relationship. She could cheat, but expected his loyalty. Some of the men she was sleeping with were the same individuals Mark considered to be his closest friends from high school. My guilt intensified tenfold when I experienced a rough patch and became homeless, only for Mark to open his door to me after Alexis asked if he could help me out. It was actually his parents' home, but only Mark and his brother-in-law lived there. He had to sneak me around the brother-in-law, as his parents, along with the sister who had married the brother-in-law, were particularly prejudiced. I am also Black and homophobic people, so I was acutely aware that I really should not have been there. I just did not have any other options available at the moment. So you can imagine how terrible I felt knowing that he was taking such a significant risk for me, while I had an extensive amount of knowledge about Alexis's wrongdoings, both before and after her graduation ceremony, where Mark only learned about 2 of them. I also knew the cheating was still occurring, even after I asked Alexis not to tell me anything anymore. Although she agreed to stop telling me, she found other ways to indirectly inform me or made it so apparent that I had no doubt about what she was doing. What prevented me from ever saying anything was just how much longer I had known Alexis. She had become almost like a sister to me, and at that time had always treated me well. She did not exhibit any of the same toxic behaviors in her friendships that she shamelessly demonstrated in her relationships. That has since changed, or I would not even be writing this. But as I became closer friends with Mark, being her sole confidant was becoming an increasingly difficult role to maintain. The burden of carrying a growing list of all her betrayals was just becoming more than I could bear. I believed I made that clear to her when I asked to be excluded from certain matters. So just imagine my shock on the day she discovered her pregnancy when she insisted that I had to tell Mark that the baby was his, because she knew he would actually listen to me. You see, she did not just want Mark to be the father. She needed him to be, because he was hands down the best candidate among all the men she was seeing. Yes, Mark lived in his parents' home, but it was by choice, not necessity. He had a stable job and income, and he was still trying to make things work with her, even after he discovered that she had been unfaithful to him multiple times with multiple men. But above all, what truly attracted her was the fact that Mark's family had wealth. All the other potential fathers had significant issues that Mark did not possess, ultimately leading her to believe they would not be suitable fathers for her child. They were either equally as unfaithful as she was, financially broke, addicted to drugs, some had criminal records, one was underage, along with numerous other qualities she was not looking for in a father for her child. She genuinely expected me to lie to his face about something that would have completely altered his life. I could not believe how far she was willing to push her deception, and she and I ended up having a heated argument. When I did ultimately speak to Mark, I did not reveal anything I knew he did not already understand. I could have, but I was still very conflicted about the entire situation. What I did say was that he should only sign the birth certificate after they performed a DNA test. Advice he seemed uncertain about at the time but later expressed gratitude for, as the baby truly was not his big surprise. Their relationship eventually concluded. Mark relocated to another state, and he and I lost contact for several years. I have spoken to him since then. This all occurred about 10 years ago, and he appears to be doing significantly better. He has repeatedly thanked me for the solid advice I provided him that evening, because I guess his ex almost managed to manipulate him into signing away 18 years of his life. I honestly felt I owed him at least that since he helped me in my time of need, and because I knew the unpleasant truth about his ex all along. He was always aware that I probably knew far more than I let on, but he also recognized the uncomfortable situation I was in back then, and fortunately never held it against me after everything came to light. Story 3. My classmate who cyberbullied me for my gender identity was not suspended. I checked his Twitter account and discovered he's an incel with alt-right, neo-Nazi, and fascist ideologies. I don't feel safe meeting him in person. Posting a brief version of this, still somewhat of a text, but my previous post is summarized. The other post was excessively lengthy because my autism caused me to include numerous details. I hope you can read this. In summary, I am a gender non-conforming individual. I take my classes online due to my disabilities, and I have a classmate who is a self-absorbed narcissist that cyberbullies me by making terrible statements about me. I reported him, but he was not suspended because the teacher has a good relationship with his father. I looked at this classmate's Twitter account and found that he is an involuntary celibate who supports extreme right-wing beliefs such as nazism, idolizes Donald Trump, and endorses dreadful ideas, leaving me afraid to be around this person. I will start with a brief introduction about myself. I, a 23-year-old assigned female at birth, am from Monterey. I have always felt uneasy in the gender I was assigned at birth. I identify as a lesbian, yet I truly dislike being perceived as a woman. I appear to be a woman, possess a woman's name, am legally recognized as a woman, and have short hair. Unfortunately, I have faced many challenges because of my gender identity and have experienced bullying because of it. Members of my own family, such as my grandparents, feel embarrassed about who I am, and my grandparents, being devout Catholics, prioritize their religion over my well-being. I have even witnessed my own grandparents cry and pray for my salvation because I did not conform to their expectations. I also had a university instructor while studying psychology who mistreated students. She was classist, ableist, and homophobic with her remarks toward students. She mistreated me and others and was ultimately dismissed after mocking a student who attempted suicide. The truth is, this teacher caused me trauma, leading me to abandon my degree long before the pandemic began. Additionally, I have autism and mental health disabilities that increase my anxiety, and I have also faced discrimination while seeking employment due to my gender identity and disabilities. Recently, I returned to university and decided to study systems engineering, taking my classes online because of my disabilities and health issues. I was invited to a Discord group for forming systems work teams, which several colleagues joined, all of whom are cisgender men. One of these individuals, who recently turned 18, I will refer to as Sebastian to protect his identity, has been the one to harass me. Initially, Sebastian started by sharing Minecraft memes and other video game content on the server, but eventually began posting dark humor and political memes reflecting his misguided ideologies. He has been expressing sexist, racist, homophobic, and classist comments that are not humorous, frequently discussing his disdain for feminism, the LGBTQ+ community, immigrants, certain religions, communism, and other subjects he deems woke. Sebastian often instigated conflicts with me by claiming that inclusive language is foolish and that he will never respect anyone who uses it. This prompted me to report him to the management for the first time, as his comments deeply offended me. As time went on, Sebastian's behavior escalated. He wrote on the Discord server that he wanted to harm all immigrants near the school, asserting that an immigrant from Haiti almost attacked him, labeling them all as criminals. I do not know if Sebastian's claim is accurate, but I do not believe this justifies generalizing about all immigrants. I subsequently reported Sebastian several more times after he posted an image containing his entire troubling ideology, claiming to have taken the red pill, and boasting about not being brainwashed by wokeness. This time, management informed me they would speak with him. Sebastian made further offensive remarks about our president, Sheinbaum. Although I do not support our current government or her political party, Sebastian made offensive statements to provoke, asserting that women are inferior to men and should not hold presidential positions. He referred to Sheinbaum as a Bulgarian Jew and a communist, and expressed a desire to assassinate both her and AMLO, our previous president, along with those who supported their political parties. Additionally, he concocted a ridiculous conspiracy theory claiming that Jewish individuals fund the Mexican cartels. Later that same day, a fellow colleague on the server sent me screenshots of a group that Sebastian created without my knowledge, in which he communicated numerous sexist, lesbophobic, and transphobic comments about me, alongside insults directed at my uncle, who works at the university. It was painful to read those comments, particularly the claim that due to my opposition to his freedom of expression, he had been summoned to speak with a psychologist. He also made disparaging remarks about the psychologist's weight and stated that he was disgusted by the psychologist's dark skin. I shared this situation with my mother, and she went to the university to threaten to sue him for inciting hate. After that incident, Sebastian left the Discord server and has not posted anything there since. Curious, I checked Sebastian's Discord profile and saw that it linked to his Twitter account, where I discovered a plethora of disturbing content. Most of his tweets are in English, with a few in Spanish, but he participates predominantly in English-speaking groups. His profile picture shows a Minecraft character wearing a red Trump hat that reads, "Make America Great Again." For some inexplicable reason, he has numerous tweets expressing support for Donald Trump and Elon Musk, frequently retweeting from these individuals and insultingly responding to those who criticize them. Sebastian also idolizes the presidents of Argentina and El Salvador, along with far-right politicians in Europe. He engages with incel and red pill communities, lamenting the epidemic of male loneliness, and resentfully attributing his single status to feminism, progressivism, and Jewish individuals. He espouses misogynistic views, claiming that women are deceitful and do not desire nice men, that they are averse to shorter men like himself, and even defends harassment and violence perpetrated by incels, idolizing Elliot Rodger in the process. Sebastian promotes absurd conspiracy theories asserting that Jews control the world, and while he contends that Hitler was a righteous figure during World War II and justified in eliminating Jews, he simultaneously claims that the Holocaust never happened. Moreover, Sebastian isn't white. He has light brown skin, not dark brown like many Mexicans, yet he still supports nazism while proclaiming that those with darker skin are inferior. Furthermore, he absurdly claims that climate change is a myth and vaccines are ineffective, asserting that he became ill after receiving the COVID-19 vaccine. Sebastian also lacks empathy. He has tweeted derogatory remarks about those who have died in the wars in Ukraine and Palestine, defends gender-based violence and hate crimes against minorities, and spouts classist nonsense claiming that poor individuals are impoverished by choice, expressing disdain for homeless individuals who ask him for money on the street. Ironically, Sebastian has said that he does not work and is merely an engineering student whose father pays for his education. He has suggested that our state, Nuevo León, should secede from Mexico, harboring the foolish notion that our state could join the United States. What astonished me most is that, while he advocates targeting minorities, he has repeatedly claimed to be bisexual on his Twitter account and has even mentioned having masturbated to gay content. Yet he participates in transphobic and lesbophobic groups, producing nonsensical statements asserting that liberal gay individuals are foolish and that transgender people are the real homophobes and biphobes. I genuinely do not understand what mental issues Sebastian struggles with. I have seen him in person only about 3 times when I visited the university for important tasks I could not manage online. He appears to have peculiar quirks and often mutters to himself softly in English. What surprises me is that despite his nonsensical political beliefs, he performs well in math, programming, and physics at school, and even earns money by doing homework for others. The truth is that this individual is incredibly privileged. He claims to be middle class and states that his father provides him funds for buying video games while vehemently complaining about the epidemic of male loneliness and the woke. Sebastian has even mentioned that he is fortunate enough not to rely on public transportation. His father drives him to university, and he sometimes uses Uber multiple times for these trips, clearly reflecting a life of privilege. Sebastian once alluded to his parents' troubled relationship, mentioning that they never married and that his father is unfaithful, which likely explains some of his sexist beliefs. He has also revealed that his father works for a U.S. company earning dollars, likely contributing to his unfounded inferiority complex, wherein he admires the U.S. more than Mexico. I am relieved that acquiring firearms is nearly impossible in our country, yet I still do not feel comfortable being around someone who harbors toxic views and endorses harm toward individuals like myself. Story 4. 18 plus mature content. 27F and 28M, how can we better communicate with each other? I am a 27-year-old female who has been with my husband, a 28-year-old male, for almost 6 years, married for nearly 1 year, and we have known each other since we were 13 or 14 years old. Together, we are parents to 4 children, a 7-year-old female from my previous relationship. My husband has been involved in her life since she was only 6 months old, and 3 other children aged 5 years, 4 years, and 2 years. He works in a blue-collar job at the paper mill, while I have been a stay-at-home mother for 6 years. We have experienced a lot together. We are each other's best friends or worst enemies, yet we struggle tremendously with communication. He grew up in a loving home with open lines of communication, but he took on adult responsibilities early, as he had to get a job at 15 to support his mother and siblings. In contrast, my upbringing was very different. My mother was quite narcissistic and would scream at my sister and me incessantly during our childhood. She began cheating on our stepfather and left with another man while my father also abandoned us. At just 9 years old, my mother showed no concern that we lived without electricity, and we often had to eat cold canned green beans. Her priority was her new partner. Years later, when my father returned, I was forced to live with him, and he was abusive on every conceivable level. At 13, I endured beatings similar to those seen in bar fights. No one heard my cries for help, and no one protected me. As a result, I have developed into a defensive person with poor communication skills. My husband's communication is not much better. He tends to give orders as if I were one of his coworkers, expressing frustration when I do not understand his logic. When we have minor disagreements, he often tells me that I am behaving just like my mother, a remark meant to hurt, fully aware of the situation's potential for escalation. Consequently, I end up being portrayed as the irrational one, and he claims he has done nothing wrong. This behavior is not frequent, but when it occurs, this is the dynamic that unfolds. It is important to mention that I struggle significantly with premenstrual syndrome after having my last child, leading to hormonal fluctuations that cause emotional turmoil lasting a day or two, followed by a period that requires me to wear adult diapers. It is a dreadful experience before my period begins. My husband is aware of this, but treats it as a joke, suggesting that I simply need to control myself. Last weekend, for instance, as my period was about to start, he knew I was aware of this, but life must go on. He made breakfast for the kids, and while they ate, I began preparing the potato salad for a family cookout we were attending. As I moved a pan to boil the potatoes, he looked at me and said I should just wash it instead of moving it. That was the breaking point for me. I had already planned to clean everything up. By the time the potatoes were ready, I could finish clearing away the breakfast mess. However, it is the little things he says that he fails to consider. I have been cooking and cleaning for our family of 6 day after day, tidying up after his spills, his dip bottles left everywhere, and the dirt he tracks into the house every morning at precisely 5:35 a.m. These small grievances accumulate until I reach my limit. I continued cleaning and completing the salad, bathing the children to wash off syrup, dressing everyone, burying the septic line the dog dug up once again, coming inside, starting the laundry, and so much more. I felt incredibly frustrated while he leisurely lay in bed watching television because it was his day off. I closed the bedroom door behind me and lost control. I didn't care that he was lying there. I felt utterly run over. He looked at me and remarked that he shouldn't have taken the weekend off, preferring to work instead, as he would rather be anywhere other than dealing with me. My main point is that he never takes responsibility for his actions. He refuses to acknowledge when he is wrong. If something is amiss, it is always my fault. Yes, I was wrong for yelling, and I should have handled the situation better. Yet here we are. I cannot have a meaningful conversation with him. Whenever I attempt to express my feelings, I am dismissed. When I share my struggles, it is always met with comments like, "I make quick decisions at work that can save or take a life, and I figure it out." Or, "I deal with bigger issues at work and do not bring them home to burden you. Find a friend." I feel unable to vent to him about anything. I have nobody to talk to, and when I mention this, he responds by saying he does not have anyone either. I have always made myself available for him to confide in, but he either chooses not to or finds me unsuitable for that role. After last weekend, things calmed down fairly quickly, maybe 2 hours before it was resolved. However, since then, he has used it against me. He claims it is my fault he cannot stay, aroused, and wonders, "What does it say about me as a man if I let my wife treat me like this?" When he expressed that to me, I told him he was experiencing the same emotions he put me through during our first 2 years together. While I was on the operating table giving birth to our child, he confided in his ex about our problems. For 2 years, I could not comprehend why I was not enough for him or why he consistently chose to seek her out, even though she was married. My suffering lasted 2 years until I eventually forgave him, and we managed to move on and grow together. When I shared this with him, he responded by saying that I was merely raising my voice. Though I may speak a little louder when emotional, I do not consider it yelling. As he left for work, he said, "Let's just hope you can resolve this and figure out how to make me desire you again," and then he exited. Given that his relationship with his ex is a thing of the past, nearly 4 years ago, I have forgiven him fully. Yes, it hurt deeply. I have been in love with this man since middle school. After our last conversation, I threatened to expose his ex to her husband. Before my husband and I were together, she slept with him the same week she married her current husband. He let that information slip, which I confirmed later. I will never falsely accuse anyone, as I dislike being wrongfully accused myself. However, I will find a way to prove my point. After my initial threat, I attempted to reach him several times, but she got to his phone first, deleting and blocking my number along with several others I used. It was unfair for him to remain uninformed about his wife's infidelities, and I was ready to share that information with her husband. Once I took that step, everything finally concluded. Healing began, forgiveness emerged, and trust started to rebuild. Our current situation pales in comparison to how things once were. There are numerous factors at play, and I recognize my temper and difficulty managing my emotions. This cycle must end. I need to work on this, but what else can I do? 2 weeks ago, I began taking antidepressants, which are helpful, but they do not address our communication issues. At this juncture, if there is no change, I fear for the future of our marriage. We must improve our communication. I acknowledge that I have a lot of pent-up feelings with no outlet. How can we begin to communicate effectively? How can I encourage better communication with him? Finally, I desperately need him to take accountability for his part in all this. He refuses to recognize the reasons behind our current relationship struggles, never admitting any wrongdoing and constantly asserting, "I am a good man, and you won't find another man like me." I will not deny that he is a good man he is. He possesses a heart full of pure intentions and love. I would never attempt to take that away from him. Why would I strip away what I love about him? I apologize for the lengthy and somewhat disorganized post, but I truly need some guidance. I love my husband deeply, and the thought of life without him is something I do not wish to contemplate. Please help us. Story 5. I'm actually going to lose my shit on my stepdad. Sorry it's long. I am 16 years old, and perhaps I am just an overly sensitive teenager. However, my stepfather truly frustrates me. Let me start with today's events. I did not attend school for the past 3 days, and today was an unintentional mistake because I foolishly dreamed about going to school and only woke up around noon. I understand his need to discuss this with me and emphasize that I need to attend school. That is all reasonable, but it was genuinely an accident today. I explained to him that I overslept, and I even found it somewhat amusing that I dreamed about going to school. Yet he became so angry, insisting that I need to recognize that my excuse was not valid and that he expected me to be more creative in my reasoning. To me, that felt rather condescending since he sleeps until noon every single day. I am fully aware that he works from home, sometimes attending online meetings, but most of his time is spent reviewing articles and similar tasks. I questioned him, saying if he can sleep in, why is it unreasonable for me to do the same? He continued to rant about how I just sit in my room doing nothing, and claimed that I cannot compare my situation to his because I do not have responsibilities beyond going to school, that I am not engaged in work that tires my brain, and that I have a schedule while he does not. Then he asked if that made sense, or if I was just going to continue nodding with that ridiculous tight grin. I replied that I was merely picking at my lips, which is a bad habit of mine, but he began to mock me in a ridiculous manner, treating me as if I were foolish. I also tend to pick at my lips when I am trying to refrain from being disrespectful. I used to argue back constantly, but after realizing it was futile, I stopped. Now, I focus on not responding in a way they would deem disrespectful, resulting in my constant lip picking. I simply waited for him to finish his tirade and walked into the kitchen since I was hungry. I went in to grab the leftovers from dinner, which was spaghetti, and since the meatballs were separate, I asked him where they were, and he claimed he did not know. Then he started again, entering the kitchen as if I were doing something reckless and foolish, asking, "Are you seriously about to have dinner?" I explained that I was hungry, and he suggested I have something else, like a cereal bar or an apple. I told him I preferred actual food over something sweet, and he went on about how nothing is stopping me from cooking an egg, which he dislikes because he consumes many, or making a sandwich, and how we are so incredibly lazy, stating that no one has a full meal in the middle of the day. Keep in mind, I had not eaten at all. I just stared at him, trying not to respond disrespectfully again, and he remarked that I should not eat all the dinner during the day so there would still be some for the evening because my mother likely would not be preparing dinner frequently. I simply replied that I wasn't going to eat much because I have a small appetite anyway. He said that was not the point. I thought if he did not want to take too much of the food, why didn't he just prepare his own dinner to eat as much as he liked? My mother works full-time every day from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., while he is always at home. He told me that this type of behavior could disrupt my sleep schedule and then return to the living room while I chose not to eat anything. That was just today's incident. It feels like he consistently seeks to argue with me, and now that I no longer respond with confrontation, he continues to confront me, and when I finally do reply, I am considered disrespectful. What always frustrates me is when he makes comments about my mother. I remember one time while I was preparing dinner, he entered the kitchen and told me to taste it, even though it was already finished. I replied, "Well, it's already done," and then he snatched a spoon from the drawer to taste it and aggressively stated, "You and your mother are always so afraid to try your own food." I simply have sensitive teeth, which makes it painful to consume anything too hot or cold. Another instance occurred when I became ill and missed a week of school after attending my nephew's first birthday party. Initially, I was supposed to be grounded that weekend, but my mother made an exception because I was adamant about not missing his birthday. When my stepfather found out I attended, he yelled at both of us in the living room. I occasionally argued back as politely as I could because they always emphasize that my tone matters. Once he finished his rant, I spoke as calmly as possible, saying, "I understand that, but I don't appreciate you yelling at my mother." He became infuriated, yelling again about how I was being disrespectful, saying that he could not express himself in his own home and that my mother understood why he was raising his voice at her. My mother immediately told me to stop talking, as she always does, because anytime I attempt to defend myself, My stepfather starts reprimanding her once he finishes scolding me. I am genuinely serious when I say I am on the verge of losing my composure. All he does is initiate arguments with me and then becomes angry when I respond. I cannot do anything without him becoming upset about my actions. I have been working diligently to manage my emotions better, as I have always struggled with controlling my anger, and I truly do my best to avoid responding, but he makes it incredibly difficult. I feel utterly lost, yet if I do lose my temper, my mother will have to address the consequences. I simply wish I could escape for a while and have some time away from him.